There we go. So let's get our project open here. And this is our Restful Tasks API. Let me just stop this real quick and we'll restart it, clear that out. Alright. So we've got everything we need as far as our back end goes, but we haven't yet created our front end. So the first thing that you guys need to do before you've done any Angular projects is what? What do we need to have in order to build up an Angular project? Yeah, we want to use the Angular CLI. So to install that, you guys can do, I'll just show you the command. I'm not going to reinstall it here, but we could say npm I for install and then -g for global, and then we're just going to say @Angular /CLI. Okay, so that's what you're going to need. Oh shoot, that's kind of small. That's what you're going to need in order to, quote, bootstrap an Angular app. Okay?
And Marley, just to confirm, we just do this one once.
Correct.
Unlike some of the other stuff we've seen before and we'll see later, it's not per app. This is just basically putting it on there.
Correct. Yeah, so we're just doing it one time because, again, this is a global install. So we're globally installing the Angular CLI. That will enable us to just create new Angular projects very quickly. Okay, so let's do that. So we're here inside of our main project directory. I'm going to create a new Angular app. And for those of you who are in Angular already, how do I do that? ng new. Okay, and then we're going to say, what is the name of our application? So inside the platform, the recommended name is going to be public. It doesn't have to be that way for yours. You could call it something else. You could call it Angular if you want it. But we're going to stick with what the platform has. So we'll just say public. And then this is going to start creating the app for us. Okay, and then it's going to ask, would you like routing? We'll say yes for now. We're not going to use it right away. However, we will be using it later, as you guys saw there. And then you can also select what kind of styling you want for your Angular application. So we can stick with regular CSS. We can choose SCSS or Sass. We can also choose less. And then I think there's another option here that I'm not super familiar with. It's called Stylus. Has anyone heard of that before? No? Yeah, I'm not. I've definitely heard the name, but I don't have any experience with it. I'm not sure how. Probably not the most popular solution. So let's just stick with CSS.
Would that be for like a touchscreen interface?
No, I don't think so. No, I think Stylus is just some sort of a style precompiler. So you could create your styles in a certain way, and then it will boil them down to regular CSS. That's what things like less and SCSS do for us. Okay, so you can see this could take a little bit of time. It's just creating everything in our app. You can see that it's creating this, our public source app routing.module. It's creating a lot of different files on our behalf. And then once this is done, let's have a look at what's been created. Okay, so inside here, I've got this folder that has a number of different subfolders. So it's got an end-to-end subfolder, and that would be for testing, which we're not really going to be touching on here. There is a source folder, which actually has a lot of the things that we're going to be using. There's also an app folder inside here, and you can see a number of the files that we're going to be interested in. So app routing.module, later on we'll be touching on that, not today. There's the app component.html. There's the app.component.css. This is going to be the styling for that main app component. And then there's also the app.component.ts. So let's take a quick look at some of these guys, just so you guys can see what we're dealing with. So our app.component.css is currently empty. There's nothing in there. But what that would be is it would be the styling for our main app component. Okay? So let's look at that. The main app component, as you guys can see here, by default it's got a bunch of stuff already in it, and it even has a style element, which is kind of odd. It's kind of strange that they didn't put the CSS here inside app.component.css, but it is what it is. Okay, so your component.html is where the actual view part of things come into play. So we've been talking a little bit about this concept of MVC. That would be our V, right? Our view. And then this thing right here, this app.component.ts, this is where the logic for our component lies mostly. So especially if we're reaching out to some backend to get some data for it, that would be happening here inside the app or whatever component it was, the TS file. Okay, so that's TypeScript again. Now, what do I need to do to actually be able to see this? I've created an app, but has that app been turned into regular JavaScript for me yet? So again, we've got just at the app level, we have a TS file, we also have an HTML file, and we have that CSS file. Have those things been turned into something that the browser can understand just yet? No. So what do I need to do? I need to compile it, yeah. So we're going to go into our public directory, and that's where, again, that's our Angular folder. And then I need to run a command to actually compile this. So we're going to say ng build, and then I'm going to add a special flag to this, watch. What does the watch do for us?
Watch is then let you know whenever there's a change.
Well, not only does it let us know, what else does it do?
It updates the distribution.
Yeah, it recompiles everything for us, so that if we were to refresh that page, we should see the new version of our app, which is pretty nice. And then once you see that we've built all these chunks right here, okay, that means that the app is actually ready for us. Okay? How do we enable our localhost? So we're running right now on localhost 3000. How do we enable that to be able to serve up what we just created? Saw some shoulder shrugging. Jamie?
Sorry, I missed the question.
No worries. So we've now built this Angular app right here, and then the question is, so how do we get our localhost 3000 to serve that up for us? Tyler?
You set the Express apps static folder to the distribution folder.
Very good. Excellent. So let's let me just close this out here, and then let's go back to our server down here. Actually, I didn't need to open that because we have server.js, and then underneath where we have our API routes, this is where we're going to connect our Angular app. Okay. So Tyler, what am I going to type in here? App.use. Okay, so we're doing some middleware, right?
Express.static.
Good.
Then I think
So we're going to invoke that method.
I think like dir name.
Yeah, we'll do dunder dir name.
Plus public slash dist slash public. I think.
Okay, good. So let's take a look at what that actually means. So inside of our Angular app folder, we also have this dist folder and then this other public subfolder. Do those things exist when you first bootstrap the Angular app?
No.
No, they're not even there. So those only get created once we've run ng-build, and then they're available to us. So if we route static to that particular folder, it's going to pick up this index.html here. So if I open this up, this is the built version of our Angular index.html, and that's what should be served up when we hit the root route, right? And then also there are some other files that have been built up here. As you can see, we've got our main.js. There's also this polyfills.js. So all of those JS files are going to be called on by this index.html. So if you look at it here, Notice how we're loading all that stuff up. So we're loading up runtime.js, polyfills.js, styles.js, vendor.js, main.js. So a lot of different JS files are being loaded on this. And there were some questions actually yesterday about, how does the client able to use Angular? Well, this is how. Because when the client gets this index.html page, it's also loading all of these other JavaScript files that have been created through the build process. Okay. All right, and then there's one other thing you guys can notice here on line 11, app root. What do you think that represents? Yeah, so this is basically where our application is going to be mounted. Okay? So everything that we do inside of our application as far as components and then subcomponents, because there could be components nested inside, will be loaded right in this spot in line 11. Okay? Cool. So let's save this, the server.js, and then let's go back to localhost 3000 and see if we're actually seeing an Angular app. And yes, indeed, we are. Okay? Yeah, pretty fancy looking, right? So this is just the standard Angular template that you get whenever you bootstrap an Angular app. Okay? Now what we want to do is actually connect this with our backend, because our backend, remember, is serving up all of these tasks, or it's giving us some endpoints where we can go and retrieve some tasks. So what we want to do is we want to be able to show those tasks on our page. All right. Now, what do we need in order to do some fetching from our backend? A lot of different things here, right? So what were we using when we were making AJAX requests back? What do you think when we did like the Star Wars API, right? So what were we using?
Was it get? When we getting the data? HTTP request?
We did them in a couple different ways, right? And at first we used jQuery. So remember that we did $.get. And then later on, I showed you guys another method using fetch, which is just something that's native to most browsers, at least. So what that's called, though, is basically an HTTP client. It's something that we can use in order to make these HTTP calls to either our own backend or some other service somewhere else. Okay. But we don't currently have one of those in our application. Right now our application is just showing something on the screen. So what we need to do is we need to bring in some type of HTTP client in order to make these requests, right? You guys who have been in Angular, which one are we going to use?
HTTP client module or something?
Yeah, exactly. It's going to be the HTTP client module, right? And so let's open up the spot here where it talks about what the steps are. It's actually here in the service. But basically what we're going to do, we could talk about this for a quick second, but all this is talking about is how are we handling button clicks in jQuery, and then how are we making AJAX requests from that. So something like we click a button, and then we respond to that by making this AJAX request to go and get some data.
So ours is observables.
Right, ours is going to look a little bit differently. So they talk a little bit here about AJAX with Angular and observables, and that we have this thing called a subscribe method, which essentially enables us to listen to whatever comes back from when we make our HTTP call. Okay. Now, in order to actually make these calls, we're going to need to create a couple things. First, we need to make the HTTP client module available to our application. And they talk about that down here. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to import the HTTP service from, actually I'm sorry, what I meant to say is we're going to import the HTTP client module from this path. Okay? So let's go to the correct file to do that from. So we're inside of our public, right? And the place to do that is going to be inside the source folder. Inside the app folder, we have this thing called app.module.ts. Okay? And inside here is where we're going to import that HTTP client module. So the general rule of thumb that we're going to stick to here is that if you're importing things up here at the top level, these are things that are coming from libraries. So these are actually coming from your node modules, right? Anything that we import down here will be something more local, and as you can see, these have paths prepended to them. Okay, so we'll get that from client module, and that's going to come from Angular. It's from common HTTP, right? And then we need to add that to our imports array as well, so that it will be available to our application, right? Okay, so let's say HTTP client module. Good. There's also, I think sometimes this will do some autocomplete for you, so let me cut this out real quick. So if I come down here and I simply add it, let me see if it'll figure out where it's coming from. No, it won't. Have you guys had any autocompletes like that work for you in Angular? Not at all? Never mind. Yeah. Really? Common, okay. HTTP. Alright. So that's the first step that we need to do, is we wanted to make this thing available to our application. Alright? Now what's the other thing that I'm probably going to want to do? So at this point I could theoretically just import this HTTP client directly into a component. However, what we're teaching in the platform is something a little bit different than that. What we're going to do is we're going to create a service which is going to make all of our HTTP calls on our behalf. All right? So let's create that. So I will create another terminal window here, and I'll just go into my public folder again. All right, so notice that I have some different terminals running. What terminals am I running right now?
Build watch.
Build watch, yes. So if I make any changes to my Angular app, it should be instantly updated for me. What else? Yes, I'm also running my server.js. So now I've created a third terminal window so that I can actually create something. I'm going to use the Angular CLI one more time. Okay, so I'm going to run this command, ng, and we'll say generate. You guys can do G for short if you like. And we'll say service. I'm going to call this service HTTP because it's going to help us make HTTP requests.
Does that mean it can do other servers? Other requests?
What do you mean that it can do other requests? I didn't follow that.
Because you say you name it because it's going to do HTTP requests for us. Does that mean like it's capable of doing other type of requests?
Well, you could create a service that would do something else, sure, that wasn't just for making HTTP requests, but we're just making one specifically for that purpose. Okay. All right, so let's see what got generated. It says here that it generated the service.spec.ts and also the service.ts. So let's go look over here. So we have both these files created. The spec file is going to be for testing, and we won't be covering that. But the service.ts, that is the main file that we need to look at. Okay. So up in here, we've got basically what looks like an empty class, right? Nothing in there. What do I want to bring into my service in order to be able to make HTTP calls? I want to bring in the actual HTTP client, right? So if I try to, I'm going to try for autocompletes again. We'll see if it works. Okay, so we'll say private underscore HTTP. So I'm saying I'm creating this attribute underscore HTTP, which is going to be an instance of HTTP client. Hey, it worked! Did you guys see that?
Yep.
So once I actually did that, it imported for me, which is kind of nice. Notice that the path is exactly the same as where we took the HTTP client module. It's going to be at Angular /common/HTTP. Okay? Cool. So the other thing that I want to do is actually create a method that will enable me to go get all my tasks, because that's what I want to do. Okay, so let's say we'll just call it getTasks. It doesn't need to take anything in because we're simply getting everything. And then in order to do it, I'm going to say an observable. So you guys that have been doing this already sort of understand what this concept of an observable is, but it's something that we can subscribe to that will then give us back some data once the HTTP call has been completed. Okay. So we're going to do this dot underscore HTTP, and then we're going to make a GET request. Does anyone know where we're going to make that GET request to? Right there. To the server. And so the route that I'm using here was just /API/tasks. Okay. And then I'm going to subscribe to this observable and do something once the data comes back. So let's just say observable.subscribe. And then when I get the data back, I'm just going to console log what it was.
Is it like an async queue? What are you subscribing to?
We're subscribing to this GET request right here. So it's going to shoot off this GET request on my behalf, and then once the data comes back from that GET request, then we're just going to log out what came back. Right? All right. So have we actually invoked this anywhere, or are we doing this yet? Not yet, right? All I did was I created a method that that can do it for us. All right. So let's do this. So inside of our app module, now that we've created this service, we also need to make it available inside of our providers array. So I'm going to try to do that again with autocomplete. I don't know for sure if it'll work, but let's just do it. So we'll say HTTP service. Hey, it worked. So notice down here on line 7, it's actually imported the HTTP service on our behalf right there. So if you type it in inside your providers array and then hit tab, it will automatically do the importing for you. So that's kind of cool. It's just one nice thing that I don't need to remember how to path this. Not that it's hard, but it's like, you know, if you could get some autocomplete there, it's nice to do. Okay. So now that I've made that available also throughout my app, where do I need to import it? Where do I need to import this service?
Your component.
Yeah, exactly. In my main app component, right? Because right now the service is not being used. I just need to import it so that I can use it. Okay, so let's go to our app component here. And then inside of our constructor, Angular has this concept of dependency injection. So just like we saw inside of our service, we were injecting an instance of the HTTP client module. or actually the HTTP client, I should say, not the module. But so what we're going to do here is we're going to inject an instance of our HTTP service so that we can use it inside of our app component. All right, so let's say private HTTP is going to be an instance again of our HTTP service. Okay, and I think I got my HTTP service up there. And I'm getting something here, declaration. Oops.
Yeah, I thought it was in the.
Oh yeah, you're right. I put that in the wrong spot, sorry. Let me put that back up here in the actual constructor argument. Okay, cool. So when I create this app component, Angular is then going to inject an instance of the HTTP service into the component for me so that I can actually use it. All right. When do I want that to run? When do I actually want to go get my tasks?
When the page loads, or initially?
Yeah, probably on initialization. So Angular has this lifecycle method. It's called ng-on-init, and what that means is that once the component has initialized, we can run some code inside there. All right. So in order to use that, we have to say app component implements on init. Why am I getting red squigglies on there? Oh, because we haven't actually created the onInit method. Okay. So once we implement onInit, we have to include that method inside our component. Otherwise, you're going to get the red squigglies there telling you it incorrectly implements onInit. All right. So inside here, let's do something in onInit. And what do we want to do here?
Call this show out.
Let's just go get all the tasks. Exactly. Okay. So let's do this ._HTTP .get tasks. And is that going to put them on the page for us yet? No. So for right now, all we're doing is we're just logging, right? And while we're in here too, I just want to show you guys. This is a way that we can change the title of the page, right? I mean, this is super rudimentary, but if I want to change what's appearing on the page, so let's go back at to see what we're seeing. The title is, what was it? Public? Yeah, so the title is public right now, and it's saying here, public app is running. So let's see if we can change this without hard coding the actual HTML. All right, so real quick, let's change it to this cool app. Okay, and if I save it and then refresh, we've changed that there. And then let's look at where that is inside the template. So if I go to my app.component.html, I guess it's actually down below all this. Hold on one second. Title. Okay, so there's title right there on line 344. And you can see how we're outputting it. So this should look really familiar to you guys. What does this look like? Yeah, it looks just like Django and also just like Flask as well, right? And you're doing the same kind of template outputting there. So we use the double mustache tag when we want to output something to our template. All right.
And what's the template? It's just Angular templating?
Yeah. Yeah,
So this is Angular's native templating.
Correct. Yep. Exactly. All right, so that's how we could change something that was in there. I could just change it in the component. But again, what we're working on here is fetching our data. So we're just going to go get our tasks when the component initializes. All right. Let's see if we got anything in there, because we probably should have, right? Side of our console. Okay. So what I got here, so when I console log my tasks, was just this object that had a tasks array inside of it. Okay? Because that's exactly how I sent it back from my back end. I sent back an object that had a tasks array. So we're seeing it here. These are all my tasks. I took the liberty of creating another one yesterday so that we had more than one. Here we've got a get black belt task, rock the test. All right, I know you guys are all going to do that. Yeah, boom. So now what we want to do, we're able to log it successfully, so that's nice. But we want to get it on the screen, right? Let's work on that component. So how do we do that? Here we're calling .get tasks, but again, where are those tasks being logged?
Console.
Yes, in the console, but specifically, what Angular piece is logging those?
Service.
The service right now. So we need to find a way to get those tasks from the service back here to the component. So how do we do that? Another function, is that what you said?
Yeah.
Okay. No. What we're going to do, so rather than directly subscribing to it here inside the service, what we're going to do is we're going to return the observable itself to give it back to our whatever component is using this. So that way in our app component, we'll have access to the observable and we can then subscribe to it. Okay? So let's change how this code is working. So instead of setting this to an observable, I'm simply going to return it back. So that will return me the observable itself, and then inside the app component, we'll subscribe to it there. All right? So let's go back into the app component. And then when we run this .http.getTasks, we need to subscribe to it, right? And I'll drop that on another line so it's a little more clear. Okay. And then I'm going to get some data back. Oops. Okay. Now, in order to actually do anything with this, I'm just going to set up a tasks attribute up here so that once the tasks come back, I can replace it with the tasks that came back to the server. So let's say tasks equals an empty array. Okay, and then when this comes back, what am I going to do? Right. So we'll say this dot tasks is going to be data.tasks, right? Okay. Anyone know why I'm getting squiggly on that?
Yeah, you need to change your data type.
So it thinks right now, basically Angular is saying, we don't know what kind of object data is. Data could be any different type of object. We don't know that it actually has a tasks key. Okay, so let's just tell Angular to back off for a second. Let's just say data is any. All right. So that should be okay. All right, and then once I do that, let's just go ahead and log them out before we put them on the screen. So we'll say this.tasks. And let's try to refresh this now. Okay, so we're still getting our log. That means that we successfully were able to change our this.tasks, right? Okay, so let's output them on the screen. Let's go back to our template here. And I'm just going to basically yank out all of this code. Actually, most all of it. So there's something down here for routing that I'll leave there. Because we'll use this later on once we get into routing. But let's take out everything else. Okay, done. Okay, and then what I want to do is I want to just basically iterate through my tasks on the template. Questions? Stretching? All right, cool. So how do we iterate through things in an Angular template? Okay, so we're going to use this thing called ng4. So let's say our tasks have some different things. Let's just create a table, right, as we always do. So if I go table,thead, trow, and then I've got ths. We have 3 different things, right? Okay, times 3. Up, tbody, trow, td times 3. Okay, so we got name, description, completed. Okay, and then here inside of our tr, this is where we're going to use our ng4. So we're going to be iterating through all the tasks that came back, right? So to do that, we're going to do asterisk ng4, and then we're going to set that equal to something. Okay. So what do we want to say? Task of tasks, right? And then inside each one of those tasks, I'm just going to simply output the different attribute that I want, right? So using those double mustache tags, let's just say task.name, task.description, okay, and then down here we'll say task.completed. This is going to be a Boolean, however. Do we need to coerce that into anything? I don't know. Let's just see what this looks like for now.
I think it's title.
Title? Oh, you're absolutely right. Yeah. Good call, Alan. Okay. Title. Go back there. All right, so there we go. So now we're able to iterate through our tasks, and it's just telling us whether those tasks are completed.
So it doesn't require you to escape the for loop in the templating logic?
When you say escape it, do you mean end the for loop?
Yeah, but usually in the other templates, right, you have some kind of like
End for?
enter and then end for. Yeah?
Right. Okay.
So this doesn't.
So this
that.
is happening automatically in that closing tr tag.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's really all there is as far as just outputting something to the template. Now the other goal that we wanted with this interactive is we want to be able to click on a specific task. So basically we'll have like a view button or something like that, and then show it down below. Okay. So let's talk about how to do that. So first I just want to put a little button next to each task. So let's just create another th here. Or we'll just say actions, whatever. Oops. Actions. Okay. And then we'll say there's going to be a button inside here. And we'll say view. Now, let's make sure that's rendering correctly. Okay, so now we have our button here. We want to be able to respond to a button click. Okay. Remember how we did this in jQuery, with jQuery? Yeah, exactly. So we would select the element, and then we would just say .click, right? Okay. We're going to do it a little bit differently here inside Angular. And the way that we're going to do it is by creating these parentheses here. And this will say we are now listening for clicks. And then we need to set what's inside this to some action, something that we want to have happen. Okay. So what's the action that I want to have happen when we click on this button? Yeah, I want to show something down at the bottom. Show that specific task that I just clicked on. Okay. So let's create something inside of our component that can do that for us, that can basically switch the active task. And I'm just going to set at the very beginning, we'll say active task equals null. Okay, so initially when I load up the page, I just want to say, I haven't even selected a task to look at yet. Okay. And then we'll just create a little method that can switch it for us. Okay, so we'll call it switch, or how about we just call it set task, set active task. Okay, and what do I want to take in my active task?
ID.
I'm going to do even better than that. I'm going to take in the entire task. And the reason why is because then I can take that task that I took into the function and just assign it up here. So I can say my active task is now that task. So let's take in a task, and then we'll say this.activeTask equals the task that I just took in. Does anybody have any questions about this part yet? I know some of you haven't done the assignment yet, so that may seem a little bit weird. No questions? How do I grab it? So I'm going to grab it directly in the template. Because remember how we're iterating through our tasks, and for each task, we now have a reference to that entire task. So that's how I'm going to get it. Okay, so inside here, we're going to say set active task. And then, again, since I'm iterating through these tasks, I have a reference right now to the entire task object. So let's pass it through. Okay, and for right now, let's just log out what the active task was when we set it. So we'll just say console.log this.active task. All right, so let's click some buttons. So you can see here that our active task has changed to this one, the eat breakfast one, which was that top task, right? And then if I click the second one, I would expect it to change to that. There it goes. We got rock the test down there. Okay. Now all we need to do is really show this down at the bottom of the page. So if we have an active task, let's show it. Show all the details. Even though we're kind of showing all the details already, it's just the activity of doing this that I want you guys to understand. Okay, so if I only want to show something under certain conditions, how do I do that inside of an Angular template? ngIf. So we have this other directive. We already used one directive, the ng4. Now we're going to use a different directive just for conditionals. And it'll be very similar to what we saw in Python. All right, so down below this table, let's just create a div. And then I'm going to do an ngIf there. So we'll do the asterisk and then ngIf. And then what the if is looking for is something that evaluates to true or false. Okay? So if this thing evaluates to true, I'll actually show this div. Otherwise, I won't show it at all. So what's our condition going to be? So if active task not equal to null, then let's show the active task. So we'll just have some p tags in here probably. So we'll say active task dot title. Whoops. And then I'll do the same thing with active task dot description. And then down here we'll do completed. Okay, so let's refresh that guy. Okay, so notice how that div's not there yet because again we don't have an active task. We loaded up the component, but we just have our list. So let's click on something. And there we go. Now we have an active task, so we're seeing it down here. If I click on the other one, then it changes. And we can keep changing back and forth just by clicking on that button. Any questions, clarifications needed on this? Phones all around? Yes?
You're making one request to the backend essentially. You're fetching the data.
One time.
It's not clear to me where's the data then being managed after that.
After that, it's being stored inside the component.
So okay.
Yeah, so here if we go back to the component,
So the template-
notice how I set a tasks variable or attribute up here
okay.
on line 12. And then when our request came back, I replaced all the tasks from what we got back from the backend.
So the component's managing the data, and then the template exposes it as
Correct.
As you
Yep.
as you expose it. Okay.
Exactly. Cool. Let's see some thumbs on this. Okay, good. Some sideways. All right. Clarifications here? Any questions?
I'm gonna ask real quick. Could you just go over like what is the purpose of the service in this case? Like here in the platform, they said that the service is taking like the role of the model, like the data.
Mm-hmm.
But like you mentioned that we could theoretically just with the HTTP client, we could directly call on it from our component, right?
You
like,
could,
We could bypass
right.
the service altogether. So
Right.
what is a service? Why do we want to use it here? And like when do we use them?
It's essentially a way that we can modularize things out and sort of create one spot where we're managing all of our HTTP type of requests. So rather than putting a lot of that logic inside the component, we're going to put it inside of a special place inside the service, and then we'll just call on the different methods as we need them.
Okay. So we would do this for pretty much any project that we make. We'd have some form of an HTTP service.
Right.
Okay.
Exactly.
And you would have one component file for a full Angular app?
For right now, yes, we do, but later on when we do routing, we're going to have more than one component. So yeah, this is just sort of like the bare bones right here. Any other clarifications? No? Stevie, you feel pretty good about this? Sort of?
I just can't get my shit to work. Just like, it ain't going.
Well said. Okay. Well, we can have a look at it.
I still have a question. Oh, yeah, I was just going to say, is there's still a bunch of people not in Angular yet?
There are a few. I think most of you guys are, though. I took hands. It was almost everyone.
Jason, Stevie, I don't remember what section that was. I think it was services. They were working on like a day, like I think yesterday. Just watch out on the platform if you start going through this, because some of the instructions where they're showing you like a block of code, it's not necessarily clear the positioning of it, and we were actually putting it below some. Yeah, I think so. There was something that wasn't just quite positioned right. It was like outside of the bracket, and it needed to be moved up. So if you get